Hello guys, welcome back to a brand new video. I said I was going to do this a while ago and we're finally getting around to it. We're going to be doing a very long tutorial on how to get the custom livery done and installed into F124. In the previous years, the videos I've done have been relatively quick, snippy, short. Some people felt that was a bit too quick for them. They didn't really understand and kind of needed like a step-by-step basis with them. So that's what this is. We're not going to be covering the designing aspect of a livery. That'll probably be a separate video, which you can then take into other aspects of every other game. We're going to take it step by step as I break down the fundamentals and kind of help you understand a little bit more if you are having issues. So in the description of the video, there'll be a link to download these modding files. I've collated them all into one, so that way you haven't got to download multiple things and go to loads of different websites. Kind of make it a little bit easier. I would of course link the original stuff in the description as well, but for peace of mind for this, everything is in one link. It'll take you to a screen very similar to this, and what you're going to want to do is hit the download button in whatever way it comes up, and then you're going to want to save it to your desktop. So now you have it on your desktop, you're going to want to right click and extract here. Now what I use for this program is I do use WinRoll, which I've obviously mentioned a few times before when I've gone over certain aspects of installing mods. If you don't have that already, I do recommend using this as it makes it a little bit easier and a bit tidier. You don't have to pay for it, you can use the free license. It does expire and it always reminds you to pay for it, but the free version does allow you to do that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to want to drag and drop all of these onto your desktop. Now you've had all these, you can now delete this off your desktop, and we now have these files left over. So these three files here are for Photoshop based stuff. These two are install based, and this is your Ego ERP Archiver. We're going to set this up quickly. You're going to open this for the first time. It may require you to install something, and if you already have installed, happy days. When you open it for the first time, you're going to need to set your directory. Now, if you know where your directory is, that's perfect. Everyone's directory is a bit different. So what you want to do is if you want to hit set directories, it's going to come up with a file explorer to locate where your game is. In my case, I've got one on a hard drive with all my Steam games and other bits like that. If you don't know where it is, if you open up Steam and locate your F124 game, go to right click, go to properties, and then here you've got installed files. If you click browse, it'll then open up a window where that is. So what you can do is if you go back to common, you can either find it manually. If you click on the top bar, it'll then highlight it. You can right click and copy, and then if you go in here and you just click paste and hit enter, this is where all your games will be. Now it's important to make sure that you go back to the common folder when you do this, because you need to select the game, not anywhere in there, specifically the game folder. Once you've done that, you're ready to close this down, but it makes life a little bit easier later on. Now that's taken care of, we can move on to the Photoshop plugins. Okay, so let's install these two plugins. Now first things first, regarding the version of Photoshop, which has been quite a contentious discussion in the comment section, I use 21.2.4. The reason I use this is because since this version of Photoshop came out, which I believe might have been about 2020, maybe 2021, Photoshop has since discontinued the 3D aspect of Photoshop. Meaning, with the latest version installed, it doesn't work. There's no 3D tab, there's no 3D option, it will load them. However, you can't actually move them around, look at them in like a 3D space. There's a few ways you can go about this if you didn't want to use Photoshop and try to find this version, which is very much out there. I looked yesterday and it is still possible to get that version of Photoshop. I can't help you with that for other reasons, but there are educational videos out there to help you find and source that version of Photoshop. So the other options are you can use other tools like GIMP, which do use DDS files. I personally haven't ever used GIMP, haven't needed to, so I'm not sure how that works. I'm sure there are other tutorials out there, but I can't help with GIMP or reference or how to do or fix issues. The other option is using another tool like Blender, for example. If you were to put the 3D model into Blender, and then you were to work on the 2D texture in Photoshop, save it as like a PNG, for example, put it on the 3D model in Blender, the premise would be the same, right? You then have a 3D version in a different software, and you can use any version of Photoshop to work on the 2D model. But for argument's sake, the best version to use, so you don't have to use multiple programs, is 21.2.4. For these two plugins, the first one here, which is a DDS plugin, the old one, which is simply just for the SFC. You don't need this is not a requirement. This is more of an additional. All you do is you double click this, you let it load up, and then you select your Photoshop directory. Now because I have it installed, there's no point me doing that. So depending on where you have it stored, you may have your Photoshop stored in a specific place. I think the default is inside program files, Adobe. So as you can see, I've got 2020 and 2024. The 2020 is the 21.2 version. So all you do is just find this location, kind of what you did before. You can hit copy and paste. Once that's done, it's a really straightforward one. It does it all itself. Now this Intel texture one here, I've opened up this browser here with all the informations here, just so you can see how to do it. Again, you can follow this, but we're going to walk you through it anyway. So when you open this for the first time, you're going to be greeted with scripts and plugins. Let's start with the plugins folder. So generally speaking, you probably will have an x64 system. X32s don't really exist that much anymore, especially not modern ones. So in here, you've got the Intel texture work. So all I'm going to do is basically just follow this, but I know a few people are struggling with this. So what we need to do, so once you found your version of Photoshop, you're going to open up 2020 in my case. Then, just like the guide says, you're going to open up the required. Then you're going to go all the way down to plugins. And then you have file formats. And this is where you're going to stick your Intel Works plugin. As you can see, I've already got mine in here, so that's good to go. If you make your way back all the way to the beginning, and we'll do the same in this folder as well, we get the scripts. Now, this is a little bit more straightforward. Very similar process. So all you need to do is just go to presets, then scroll down to scripts, and then you just put them both in here. As you can see, mine are already in here, so I don't need to worry about that. And that is how you get the plugins for Intel working. Once you've done that, you can just go ahead and you can just delete them. These will be the next ones we'll be talking about. So let's load up Photoshop and open up the F1 24 FOM car. So once you've loaded in, you'll be greeted with this potentially. Now, first things first, before we do anything, let's make sure that everything's working as such. So the first thing you want to check is make sure you've got a little 3D tab up here, right? That's the first thing. If you use the move tool, you should be able to orientate and move your car around. Once you do that, the version of Photoshop is going to be okay and usable. Depending on how your interface works, if you on the top right here, you've got Essentials and 3D. I use Essentials for the most part, but for this example, and you may load into 3D, it may ask you to go to 3D workspace, which is fine, you can do that. So once we load up a 3D workspace, it will still look different. Every workspace is different. So if you go to like reset 3D, this is probably the generic one that you're going to have. If you go to layers, you can see we've got 3 tabs here for the floor, the paint, and the number. You can turn those on and off like that. Now, if we hit the 3D tab and go to the second one, which is show all 3D meshes and 3D extrusions, this is where it gets a bit interesting. So you've got the same thing again, you've got the number, the paint, and the floor. So what I recommend when doing this and creating a livery, only have the paint on. The reason for that is because the floor is a little bit tricky. So let's go with this for now, and I'm going to open up the paint file. Now, with it being in a 3D space, this is the main benefit of this version of Photoshop and others that do work. On here, you've got a little UV overlay tab, so you haven't got a texture. It's got one built in, so it's a perfect representation of that. If you're familiar with modding, you'll kind of understand what a wireframe is. You can go look at this and be like, okay, that's the nose, that's the halo, these are the front wing end plates, this is the rear wing, this is near the cockpit, this is the headrest, so on and so forth. So if we're going to take, you know, the front wing elements, we're just going to turn these black just as an example, just to show you how easy it is. Now, the best thing to do with this is always create a new layer, just to make life a little bit easier for yourself. So once you've done that, you can head back out to this, and as you can see, the front wing's done. So the general rule of thumb for that, as well as the floor. So with this 3D model, JB has since updated it. However, the issue I find with that is the textures are a lot smaller. So the texture size in this is 4096 by 4096, which is almost the maximum it can be in terms of actual sizing. So let's say you wanted to do the floor. So if you go back to the 3D tab and click the extrusions bit, turn off the paint and turn on the floor decal. Now, the reason I say to do this is because no matter what you put on the floor, it will kind of be hidden. In the tutorial before, I said that you do need to allow some adjustments and some tweaking to this, just because of how it's set. Now, that still also holds true. The reason for that is because it's slightly out of line, which is not really anything I can do. So you may come in instances when you're painting and you don't see it change. It hasn't changed, although you know for sure that you've definitely put that there. The easiest thing to do, so on the texture, whether it be the paint or the floor, if you just turn it off via the visibility, turn it back on, and there you go. As you can see, it's back there. Really simple little tricks just to figure out if there's any little issues, a little bit of troubleshooting, let's call it. So the best thing you can do, always save, and more save. I save mine to the Creative Cloud. That means almost every time I do something, it'll automatically save. Again, I don't expect you to be able to do that, but the issue with these versions of Photoshop, and the further back you go, the less functional the Photoshops are, just with general hardware and current updates with Windows and stuff like that. So the best thing to avoid is, like, let's say you've got it like this, but you want to go back, you want to hit Control Z, don't. It's really not worth it. It will mess up your 3D and it will probably end up breaking, and if it breaks, you kind of got to start again in some scenarios. It's always best to make sure to save. So to get this to work, once you're happy with that, it's always best to make sure you exit out of this and click save, and then save again. Sometimes you may have it where you rotate and the car snaps back. You rotate it again, it snaps back. Really simple, you just save it, close down Photoshop, reopen it, you'll be fine. When you have both the paint and the floor, you can see you can't really see the logo that we put there. That's the reason I separate it, just to make life a little bit easier. Now again, I'm not going to show you how to make a livery in this. I'm just going to put a livery in here just to show you, so we can go through the save steps. So I'll be right back. So here we are, here's the livery I'm going to be using for this demo. You may be asking, what the hell is this? This is a commission I did for Brendan Lee for his live stream where he wanted a bounty livery. Now, it looks pretty cool here. When it's in game, it looks even better. So if you go back to the floor, you go back to the paint here, I'll show you how this works. So I do have the SFC here, so I'll show you how to save these accordingly. So we'll start off with the paint. You're going to want to hit File, Save As. Then on your desktop, let's create a new folder called F124 mods. Nice and easy as that, right? Then in here, you're going to tick Intel textureworks.dds. If you don't have this, if this is not visible, you're going to need to go back and reinstall the plugins. That's the only reason it wouldn't be there. So let's call this one Paint. Hit save. And then for this is where it gets a little bit tricky with some people. So for the paint, it's going to hit color. And then for this, you want to hit BC1 sRGB and leave bitmaps on auto generate. That's good. So let's go to the floor. And then we're going to do exactly the same and save it the exact same place and the exact same way. But of course, this time we're going to change it to floor. So again, Intel textureworks DDS, color, BC1 sRGB. It's really crucial, otherwise the colors will come out really funny if you don't do sRGB. That's good. So you're halfway there. So if you do have a SFC file, they're not called SFCs anymore, but that's what they used to be way back in the day. So I'm just still stuck in my old way, creature of habit, you could say. So for these, they're slightly different. So you're going to want to hit File, Save As, and this time you're going to want to go to the D3D/DDS, and then you want to do Floor SFC. Now for this, it's going to take a little bit longer. You're going to want to do the first one, the DXT1 RGB No Alpha, the very top one on the drop down bar. You want to hit File and Save. It will take a little bit longer than the other one. This is an older plugin and it doesn't have any support now. It's really hard to find. Luckily I managed to find the installer that I have just to make life a little bit easier. And then you can go back to your paint again if you have created one, then of course. So you're going to hit File, Save As, and this time do Paint SFC. And make sure to change it to DDS. You can do it with an Intel plugin. I think this is a lot cleaner. This is the exact file that the Cody's Games uses for these files. You can mess around with Intel and try and find a version that works. For me, the D3D DDS plugin works fine. So again, hit save, DXT1 No Alpha. Like I said, they will take a hot minute to save, but once it has done, as you can see, it's reverted back to the original, what it was before we installed Livery on the floor as well as the paint. So the reason for that is because we didn't save it to the 3D model. Something I'll go over when I discuss making a livery, but something to know. So now that you've got those four textures, let's head back to the desktop. Now you're here, you have your F1 mods folder. This F124 FOM, I'm assuming by now you've probably saved it elsewhere, so you can delete the original file that you downloaded. And you're left with these. You've got the M and the blank number. Now these are crucial to get this mod working. If you've seen the other tutorial video, you'll know exactly why. But for now, let's open up the Ego ERP Archiver and open up the program. So just like the tutorial, there's going to be two places we're going to install this. So to find these, you want to go File and Open. Because you set your directory earlier, it's going to show you exactly where your files are. So you want to open up 2024 asset groups, followed by F1 2024 vehicle package. Then go to Teams, and then down here you've got Common FOM. Once you open this up, it's going to give you a whole host of loads of different textures, which we're really not worried about. We're going to, in the little search bar at the top, we're going to type 17. And what we're going to install this is on the unassigned livery 17. So first things first, how these are broken down, you've got D files, S files, M files, DA files. Don't need to worry too much about them. The D files are basically the paint files. So we've got livery 17_D, which is the paint, 17 ID8D, which is the floor, ID8S, which is the floor SFC file, the 17M, which almost works like stickers to an extent. It's probably a good way of thinking of that. That's what we got the replacement M file for. The 17S, which is the paint SFC, and the steering wheel DA, which is basically actually like a sticker that goes on top of the steering wheel. So we're going to replace that anyway. So let's start off with the paint. You're going to click on that and you go import, and you're going to find your mods folder, and then double click on the paint, and then here you can just double tap enter and it will replace it really quickly. So let's do that with the floor now. Double click, double enter, and then work your way down this small list that we've got. Annoyingly, it takes you back to the other files and whatnot, but you basically just keep working with this. So when you get to the M file, obviously we didn't save one for that. So on your desktop, one of the files that was included was an M file, labeled M. So you just install that, hit save, and it will overwrite that. So we'll do the same for the paint SFC. Go to your mods folder, paint SFC. You can do it manually, you can do it not. Now for the steering wheel, you can keep this if you really wanted to, but ultimately it's not going to make a difference because you have a different livery to what the steering wheel is going to be. You can create your own custom ones, but I think that's more like a specialized. So we're going to use the second file that was provided, was the blank number. Now this is a blank number, but ultimately it's just a blank texture. It will replace the image in this file to blank, so it's not going to be seen and not going to be shown. Now, another crucial thing that we need to do is replace the number you're going to plan on using. You can create custom numbers as well, which is, you can use a similar process, which I might touch on in the custom livery video. So let's say for argument's sake, we want to replace the number 25. So on here, we've got the 25. This is where you're going to want to install and use it properly, the blank number. Same process as normal, file, save, and then you're good. So once you've done all of these, you're going to hit file, save on the main ERP, hit save, hit yes, and then we're done in here. So then now we need to go to the second location. You're going to go file open, and we're going to go all the way back at the top here, back to our asset groups. And this time we're going to go to world vehicle package, followed up by teams, world car, WEP, world car ERP. There's only one option in these files, so you've got to keep finding them from there. While we have the 25 at the top, this will happen. You cannot create preview, failed to convert texture. The reason for this is because in one area you've got all these different textures loaded in this other section compared to the other. So because they don't match, they're not going to display the same, which is a really crucial way of finding out if a mod you've done is not installed correctly, because it won't show up properly. So here, if we go import, go to your desktop and import the blank number, overwrite that and save. And then we're going to save this here just so I can show you what I mean. Once we've overwritten that, as you can see, that's now blank, right? So if we go all the way back to where we was a minute ago in the common FOM, as you can see, it now doesn't have that error message because it's written correctly on both areas where we need to update the textures. It's a really good way of trying to find out any issue you have when installing your mods. If things are blurry, it'll be exactly the same thing. So in here, we're going to type 17, and we're going to redo what we did in the last one. So we're going to start off with the paint. We're going to install our paint file onto this one, and then this one will be the floor. Go ahead and overwrite that and save. Then this one will be the floor SFC. I don't know why they're split up. Normally it's paint SFC, floor SFC, but you know, for whatever reason, it is what it is. It's how they've done it this year. Bit odd, but what can you do? And then underneath that, we will have the M file, of course. Back on our desktop, we have the M file. Overwrite that. And then finally, in here, for the ones we made, we will have the paint SFC. Go ahead and hit save and overwrite that. And then that's good. And then lastly, the steering wheel decal. Blank number. Once we've installed that, hit save, overwrite that. And now all of these are done as intended. If you hit at the very top, we're going to hit file, save again. Now, one thing you can do to make extra sure you've installed these properly is if you go back to the other location, so back to vehicle package, teams, common FOM, and then we can see these are all still here. If they weren't here and they had a little text saying we can't preview, it would mean it's not installed correctly and you need to make sure you do the file on both. It's probably easier just to reinstall every single one just to make sure, but if you've done it correctly, you won't have any issues and you're ready to close out of this. Now, the only other thing to do next is boot up the game. One thing you will need to do once you're in game is to change the driver number to the one that you made blank. So obviously we changed 25, so we're going to swap to that. And then now we can already see it in the background. but just for a better look of the livery, we're going to head down to showroom to player cars, and this way you get a better look at your livery in the flesh. Or you can go to the customization and you can use the right stick to move it around. This livery was, I think, the first draft version I sent to Brendan. There is quite a few mistakes on it regardless, but it is as easy as that. I hope I made this video as simple, and with it being a little bit longer, more of a slower step-by-step process, I hope it was really helpful and a bit more useful to some of you than the last one. Of course, having a short snippy one definitely helps some, but in other cases I can understand how this would help. If you have enjoyed and it has been helpful, guys, please do leave a like and make sure to comment if it has helped you, and if you do want to see any more like this as well as delivery tutorial. Until then, guys, take care. Bye bye.